Hey everybody, I'm Ryan.
Hi, Ryan.
Hi. That's my wife. she was staring at me, waiting for me to start the video so she could do that. Today we're gonna talk about my favorite deck in Pioneer at the moment, which is Enigmatic Fires. Now, there's a couple reasons to be playing this deck right now. Basically, it is the mid-range killer. If you're playing against a lot of different mid-range style decks, mostly red-black, but also Phoenix, this deck has a literally 90+% win percentage against them. Has a little bit of an issue with aggro decks and a huge issue with control decks, but if you want to target mid-range really heavily, this is the deck for you. So let's jump into how to play the deck and some card choices and stuff. So this is Enigmatic Fires. So it is a Yorion deck, first off. A big reason why it's a Yorion deck is you can get a lot of value out of the enchantments that you're sort of forced to play because of Enigmatic Incarnation. And you want to be playing a lot of cards that have like activated abilities, including the companion mechanic putting it into your hand because of Fires of Invention. So those are the two cards it is based around. Fires of Invention is a 4-mana enchantment that says you can cast spells only during your turn and can cast no more than 2 spells each turn. Okay, so that's a limitation. But you may cast spells with mana value less than or equal to the number of lands you control without paying their mana cost. Which means once you have fires on the battlefield, you get to cast 2 spells a turn for free, generally. And then we're playing a bunch of cards with sick activated abilities, right? Especially like Kenrith, and putting like Yorion into our hand and stuff like that. So we can actually use our mana every turn while still casting 2 spells a turn. Is just incredible value, and that's a big reason why it's a mid-range killer. The other combo that we're doing in this deck is Enigmatic Incarnation, where it says at the beginning of our end step, you can sacrifice another enchantment. If you do, you can search your library for a creature card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrifice enchantment's mana value, put that card in the battlefield, and then shuffle. So it's kind of like Birthing Pod, except you sacrifice an enchantment for a creature. So we're playing a lot of enchantments that like draw cards and like do other things for us. Cards, decks, or enchantments that generally we don't mind sacking, or we're going to play in a way that we don't mind sacking. And then playing a lot of Toolbox creatures. So we can use our deck as a toolbox while still getting value off of these enchantments. The nut hand of the deck, involves, one of these 2-drop enchantments, any 3-mana card, and then going Fires of Invention as your first, and then now you can only cast 2 spells a turn. Fires of Invention, Enigmatic Incarnation, end step, sack a 2-mana enchantment into one of our toolbox cards that matters. And it is absolutely disgusting when you're able to pull that off. So that you sort of understand how the deck works, let's talk about individual card choices. So the lands, so it is a Yorion deck, so we have to play a lot of lands, and we need these lands to lean towards mountains because we are playing Chain to the Rocks. Because Chain to the Rocks is an enchantment that we can sacrifice and get value off of Enigmatic Incarnation, and it's indiscriminatory. It can take out anything. It is any creature removal spell for 1 mana, which we absolutely need in matchups where, we need to remove the creatures, especially since aggro is a bad matchup for us. So there's not a lot going on in the mana base other than just playing these channel lands, and a lot of our triple lands and whatever leans towards mountains so that we can always cast Chain to the Rocks. As far as our 2-mana enchantments go, which is really the core of the deck after we cast Enigmatic Incarnation, we're playing Bitter Reunion. Bitter Reunion we're mostly using to cycle through our deck, try to find these 2 really powerful spells, and eventually be able to sacrifice it to Incarnation. Same thing with Nylea's Presence. Nylea's Presence can also turn something into a mountain for Chain to the Rocks. One thing that it's important to note, though, is if you turn something into a mountain for Chain to the Rocks and then Chain to the Rocks that mountain, be sure not to sacrifice it to Enigmatic Incarnation, because then Chain to the Rocks will fall off because it's no longer a mountain. So be really careful about that. But it serves a similar purpose as Bitter Reunion, except it also can fix our colors, which again, in a Yorion deck with no fetch lands, colors can be sort of an issue sometimes. So it fixes our colors, lets us draw a card. We can bounce it with Yorion later on and sacrifice it to Enigmatic Incarnation. Wolfwillow Haven allows us to ramp, and also really late in the game, we can hit a Wolfwillow Haven or have a Wolfwillow Haven, be casting spells off Fires of Invention, and still be able to activate the ability of Wolfwillow Haven because we're not tapping our mana for the spells we're casting off of Fires of Invention. Again, we can sack it to Incarnation. And Oath of Chandra. Oath of Chandra is pretty cool because, again, a 2-mana removal spell that we can also get value off of Yorion and Incarnation. And we come to our first toolbox card. It's not really a toolbox card, but if we chain to the rocks a token, which happens quite a bit, sometimes we liberally will chain to the rocks a token because we know we're going to make this play. We can sacrifice chain to the rocks for Spirited Companion. The beautiful part about Spirited Companion is it cycles through our deck like all these other enchantments, and Spirited Companion, being the best doggo, is an enchantment itself, so we can sacrifice it for all of our 3-mana toolbox cards. As far as our 3-mana spells go, we're playing 4 Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Fable of the Mirror Breaker does everything we want it to do. It fixes our mana. It makes a guy. It ramps our mana. It cycles through our deck with the second chapter. And we have a lot of like enter the battlefield effects with our cards. That's really what a lot of toolbox decks do. So its flipped Reflection of Kiki Jiki is always absolutely insane. And if we really want to, and if we really need to, we can sacrifice Fable to Incarnation to grab an Omnath. As far as 3-mana toolbox card goes, we're playing an Archon of Emeria. This is really good against like Lotus combo and stuff. So remember, these are cards that we are sacking our 2-mana enchantments to Incarnation to grab. Really good against Lotus combo or any like multiple color decks. Moonblade's Cleric. This allows us to just like, if we need a specific enchantment, normally we're grabbing Leyline Binding or one of these 4-mana enchantments when we play Moonblade's Cleric, Blessed Cleric, excuse me. But it's mostly just to find these important enchantments like normally Answers or runaway cards. Skyclave Apparition, just a removal spell for any permanent cost 4 or less. Very good. Glasspool Mimic. Glasspool Mimic is excellent because you can, again, copy another card on the battlefield. Because we're such a toolbox card, Glasspool Mimic is often like a second copy of a lot of these cards if we already have it on the battlefield. And it's also a land, which you play it as a land a reasonable amount of time because hitting the land drops in this deck is wildly important. Played a Deputy of Detention, again, as a removal spell. Being able to take out things that are the same name is just very good. Knight of Autumn, both as like gain life and block against aggro decks, but also artifact or enchantment hate, which really matters. Playing a Renegade Rallier. Renegade Rallier is a little rogue if you look at lists. This deck, or this card is not played that often. But I think it's really good because it's sort of I want a value card at each level of like the pod. You know, Spirited Companions are a value card here. Renegade Rallier is sort of a value card here. We can sacrifice Annihilus Presence, we can sacrifice a Bitter Reunion, grab Renegade Rallier, and then bring back either of those things and be able to continue digging through our deck and have a body, and we have given up nothing, and I really like that. Or we can sacrifice an Oath of Chandra, grab Renegade Rallier, bring back Oath of Chandra to have a body and deal 3 damage, which again, aggro is a really bad matchup for this deck, so that can be like a really aggro killer like play. And then Zur Eternal Schemer, 1/4 flyer for 3. Enchantment creatures you control have Death Touch, Lifelink, and Hexproof, and you can pay 2 mana to make a non-aura enchantment become a creature in addition to its other types, and has base power and base toughness equal to its mana value. It's really cool because like it makes your enchantments be able to block and have lifelink, which is really good against aggro decks, but also against these mid-range decks, which again we're trying to be a mid-range killer with this deck. We're able to man up things like Leyline Binding, and be able to jam in, and they're hexproof, and it's like good luck, man. And of course, Fire of Invention we've already talked about. Enigmatic Incarnation we've already talked about. Omnath is our 4-mana value card. We are very rarely grabbing it because Fable the Mirror Breaker is great in and of itself. But, I mean, sometimes we're burnt out on enchantments. We have a flip Fable and we're just chilling there, and sacrificing it to Incarnation to grab an Omnath can get us rolling again. Also, like, if we're playing a Fable and we make that 2/2, grabbing an Omnath and playing a land against an aggro deck is like, and gaining that 4 life is absolutely excellent. So very often we'll draw multiple Incarnations, or we don't need Fires of Invention anymore because we've cast all the spells in our hand or whatever. So these are our 5-mana grabs. Kenrith is our best grab, especially if we have Fires out already, because we aren't using our mana, and we can use our mana with Kenrith. If we grab Kenrith with open mana, it is absolutely disgusting. We can draw more cards to be able to hit, like play more cards off of Fires. We can bring back stuff that had been dealt with, which our whole deck is Toolbox, which is nasty. You know, or just like gain 5 life against these aggro decks or anything, or be very, very aggressive and grab very strong cards and give them haste. Cavalier of Dawn is a 5-mana removal spell in this slot. Also note that it can be anybody, so like you can destroy your own thing, your own non-land permanent, normally one of these enchantments, to create a 3/3 if you really, really need to. And a 4/6 with Vigilance is pretty solid. Tolsimir is sort of a removal spell as well in this 5-mana slot. You know, you get 2 3/3s and you can fight something with toughness 3 or less and kill it and gain 3 life. Like, it's just often is a stabilizer card against aggressive decks. And Karuga is our value card. Remember, there's a value slot in every one of these. Karuga, we grab Karuga. Often we draw 3 or 4 cards off of Karuga because so many cards in our deck are cost a lot. Leyline Binding is just an obvious choice with, it eventually turns into a 1 mana, normally 2 mana though, because we don't run a lot of black lands, and if we don't have Annihilator's Presence out. Removal spell of literally anything, and then in the late game we can sacrifice that to Enigmatic Incarnation to grab one of these big boys, which, I mean, there's incentive to Leyline Binding like tokens, or Leyline Binding really early on and Leyline Binding liberally, so like it's okay giving something back, or they get nothing back when we sack it to Incarnation for either Agent of Treachery or Titan of Industry. Speaking of our big ones that we can sack Leyline Binding to, Agent of Treachery, gain control of target permanent, beginning of end step. If you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, draw 3 cards. That's just like really solid. It's a removal spell. It's a 2-for-1 no matter what. So it's actually something that we're totally okay with sacrificing Leyline Binding to, because like get the thing back, now take the thing. And it has some other cool synergies, right? Things like if we have a flipped Fable of the Mirror Breaker, notice that Agent of Treachery is not legendary. We can copy Agent of Treachery, take another thing, and then even after we sacrifice it, it doesn't matter. Like when Agent of Treachery goes away, we still get to keep the things. Or Yorion, we can play Yorion, bounce Agent of Treachery, take another thing, right? So there's a lot of like synergy there. Titan of Industry, same synergies as Agent of Treachery with Yorion and Fable, but it's just like another like really solid card, right? You can do sacrifice a Leyline Binding to like literally get 11 power on the battlefield and more stuff. Is a toolbox for killing artifacts or enchantments. We can gain life, whatever you need. As far as the sideboard goes, obviously 1 slot is for Yorion, because Yorion combos with nearly every card, in the deck, right? I mean, everything has entered the battlefield effects, which is really, really wild and can do some crazy, crazy stuff. And especially if you have Fires of Invention out, you just like can just bring it back and cast it in the same turn very, very early on, which is excellent. We're playing 2 portable holes for aggro matchups. Also fine against like green to be able to hit their Willful Havens and Mana Dorks, to slow them down and whatever. Rest in Peace is really solid against things like Phoenix and Absent Greasefang. Again, also an enchantment that if we really want to late the game, we can sacrifice to Incarnation. Disdainful Stroke is, for obviously decks that have a lot of really important spells that cost 4 or greater, right? Like the Mirror Match or green or whatever. Lotus Field. Mystical Dispute is for the blue decks. I think that's pretty obvious. One thing that's important to mention with these counterspells, though, is you have to be a little careful when we play Fires of Invention, because counterspells are now dead in your hand after you play Fires of Invention, because you can't cast spells on your opponent's turn. You can protect your own spells, which is really nice, but if you're playing these to interrupt something your opponents do, like for example against Lotus Field, really think hard before you cast Fires of Invention. Like, is double spelling more important than being able to counterspell your opponent's stuff? Sometimes it is, but there is a non-bow here, but I do think that playing the counterspells is really important, especially in a Yorion deck. You're not going to see the fires all the time. Just be aware of the non-bow. And then Rending Volley, again, for the mono white deck, is really good against spirits, etc., etc. So there you have my favorite deck in Pioneer, how it works, card choices, all of that stuff. If you like this video, if you want more videos like this, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias, especially on Twitch and Twitter and Discord. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.